They ruled with crowns of gold, but their minds, that's another story. From kings who bathed in blood to those who married trees, history's thrones have seen habits so bizarre they make today's headlines look tame. These weren't just rulers, they were enigmas wrapped in power, obsession, and madness. You're about to meet 11 monarchs who redefined the word weird. Some believed they were gods, others slept in coffins, and one even made his servants bark like dogs. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the royal world of strange rituals, twisted passions, and royal routines that will leave you asking, what on earth was going through their royal minds? Let's uncover the most bizarre habits of kings history tried to forget, but you'll never be able to. They say power changes people, but for one king, power devoured his soul. Meet Vlad III of Wallachia, better known as Vlad the Impaler, a man whose dinner guests were corpses and whose nightmares were real. While other rulers held feasts, Vlad held funerals for his enemies. And the strangest part? He enjoyed every second of it. The story begins in the mid-1400s, a time when Europe trembled before the Ottoman Empire. Vlad was born into chaos. His father was murdered, his brothers betrayed, and his homeland burned. He grew up surrounded by death, so maybe it's no surprise he became obsessed with it. But Vlad didn't just kill, he performed death like an art. He'd impale his enemies on wooden stakes, lining the roads with bodies as a warning. When Ottoman envoys refused to remove their turbans in respect, Vlad nailed the turbans to their heads and sent them home as fashion examples. Now, here's where things turn from brutal to bizarre. Vlad believed that fear was stronger than any army. He'd eat meals while hundreds of impaled soldiers screamed around him. Some say he dipped his bread in their blood. Others say he just liked to hear their pain as a music. Whether that part's true or not, it worked. Entire armies turned back just from hearing his name. But there's something darker beneath the legend. You see, Vlad's obsession with blood wasn't just cruelty, it was ritual. He believed bathing in blood made him immune to death. Some historians think it was a form of superstition. Others think it was early psychological madness. But the truth is, Vlad thought he could become immortal. His castle walls were stained red, his name became myth, and centuries later, his habits inspired the world's most famous monster, Count Dracula. And yet, the people of Wallachia loved him. They said, better a cruel king than a cowardly one. He crushed corruption, punished thieves, and defended his land with terrifying efficiency. He was both protector and predator. Vlad didn't just want power. He wanted control. Control over life, control over fear, and maybe even control over death itself. As one chronicler wrote, he drank not from cups of gold, but from the suffering of men. By the time of his death, Vlad had impaled more than 20,000 people, creating a forest of the dead. But in his twisted mind, this wasn't madness, it was order. He believed he was cleansing the world of evil. That's the terrifying paradox of history's bloodiest kings. Sometimes the monsters think they're heroes. So next time someone calls you too controlling, just be thankful you're not Vlad the Impaler, the king who turned cruelty into a crown. Every king dreams of finding the perfect queen, graceful, loyal, and pure. But what if your queen wasn't even human? Meet the king who didn't just lose his mind, he married a tree. Deciduous tree, our story takes us back to ancient India, to a time when kings ruled not just lands, but hearts, rituals, and gods. Rituals and gods. Among them was King Bhaskaravarma, a ruler of the Kamarupa kingdom. He was brilliant, spiritual, and a firm believer that every living thing had a soul, even the trees. But one strange obsession consumed him: purity. He believed no woman on earth was pure enough to be his wife. So he turned to the one being that had never sinned, never lied, never betrayed: a tree. It began as a ritual of devotion, but soon spiraled into obsession. He would spend hours beneath a massive banyan tree near his palace, whispering prayers, and then whispers turned into conversations. His servants claimed they saw him laughing, arguing, even apologizing to the tree. To the court, he said the tree was a living goddess, his divine soulmate. And then one day, he announced his engagement. The palace went silent. Priests were confused. Courtiers were terrified. But no one dared oppose the king. After all, when a man with an army says he's in love with a tree. So the royal wedding was arranged. The court musicians played, priests chanted sacred hymns, and the banyan tree, was adorned in golden silks and jewels. The king placed a crown of flowers on its branches, tied the sacred thread around its trunk, and declared her queen of Kumarupa. And it didn't end there. The king ordered a golden canopy to be built over her roots. He visited her daily, offering food, flowers, and conversation. He would dine beside her, ask her advice on politics, and celebrate festivals together. The courtiers bowed before the tree, terrified of offending their new queen. Now here's where it gets even stranger. The kingdom actually flourished. Rains came at the right time, crops grew, and enemies fell. People began to believe the tree queen brought divine luck. Soon, worshippers from nearby villages started visiting her shrine, seeking blessings for fertility, marriage, and peace. Bhaskaravarma's obsession became a religion. He declared a law: anyone harming trees would be executed. And you know what? That's how the kingdom became one of the greenest in ancient India. But behind the divine devotion was a lonely truth. The king had lost his human connection. He spoke to no one, avoided his ministers, and lived in isolation. His wife could never love him back, yet he loved her more than life itself. To him, she wasn't wood and leaves, she was eternal, pure, divine. When he died, the chronicles say he was buried beneath that same banyan tree, his crown resting against her trunk. Over centuries, legends grew. Villagers claimed the wind through her branches sounded like whispers, like a king calling for his queen. Historians still argue whether the story is myth or truth. But one thing's certain: this wasn't madness for Bhaskaravarma. It was faith, twisted, lonely, and eternal. Some kings build empires, others build love stories. But this king, he built a marriage between man and nature. A love so bizarre it outlived his dynasty. So next time someone says all love grows, remember, in this kingdom, it literally did. Some kings built empires, but this one built a mirror. Meet King Louis XIV of France, the man who turned vanity into a government policy and made his reflection the most powerful thing in Europe. They called him the Sun King. Why? Because, according to Louis, the entire world revolved around him. Sonny didn't just rule France, he performed France. Every glance, every gesture, every breath had to look magnificent. And if it didn't, heads rolled, sometimes literally. Louis believed he was chosen by God himself, that his beauty, grace, and elegance were divine proof of his destiny. And so began the era of royal obsession with self-image. While other kings built fortresses, Louis built something far more dangerous. Versailles, a palace made of gold, gardens, and, most importantly, mirrors. Over 350 mirrors lined the walls of his palace, reflecting not just his face, but his ego. Each morning he'd wake up to a ritual called Lever du Roi, the King's Rising. And yes, it was an event. Over 100 nobles gathered just to watch him wake up. Ministers fought for the honor of handing him his shirt. Musicians played soft flutes as he stretched. And then came his favorite part, the mirror ceremony. Louis would stand before his grand mirror hall, staring at himself for hours. He practiced walking, smiling, even breathing beautifully. He believed a true king should move like a god. He'd ask his attendants, "Does the sun not look splendid today?" Of course, they always agreed, unless they valued their heads. But this obsession wasn't harmless vanity. Behind the glitter and gold was a deep fear, the fear of imperfection. Louis couldn't tolerate seeing anyone more beautiful, more elegant, or more adored than him. He banned bright colors that might steal his light. Only he could wear golden robes. Others were forced into dull shades. If someone's perfume was stronger than his, they were exiled. If someone outshone him at a ball, they never got invited again. Versailles became a golden prison, full of beauty, but empty of honesty. Even his servants had to bow before him when handing a mirror. He made sure everyone around him saw only what he wanted to see. The God King, flawless and eternal. But here's the twist: behind closed doors, Louis was terrified of aging. He wore makeup, powdered wigs, and perfumed gloves to hide the smell of sickness. He ordered artists to paint him younger, slimmer, and stronger. In truth, the Sun King feared one thing more than death: the day his reflection would betray him. Historians say that in his later years, when wrinkles began to form, he stopped looking into mirrors altogether. The man who once worshipped his reflection now hid from it. His servants covered mirrors with cloth whenever he passed by, and yet his obsession left a mark that outlived him. Versailles became the symbol of luxury, of power, and of the human hunger to be seen, to be admired. His mirror hall became a metaphor for all of us, chasing perfection while hiding our flaws. When he died, his last words reportedly were, "I loved nothing but myself, and that was my greatest sin." In the end, Louis XV didn't die as a king of France. He died as a prisoner of his own reflection. Like his own reflection. Because sometimes the brightest suns burn themselves out trying to prove they shine the most. Most kings dream of living forever, but this one preferred to sleep with death. Meet King Frederick William I of Prussia, the monarch who turned his palace into a military camp and his bedroom into a graveyard. They called him the Soldier King, but behind that iron crown beat the heart of a man haunted by the thought of dying unprepared. While other rulers slept on silk sheets, Frederick chose something far more chilling, a custom-built coffin. Yes, you heard that right. Every night he climbed inside the same wooden coffin he planned to be buried in. No guards, no golden drapes, just him, the darkness, and the faint echo of his own breath. When his courtiers asked why, he gave a terrifyingly calm answer. A king who forgets death becomes a fool. Frederick believed sleeping in his coffin would remind him of mortality, discipline, and duty. He thought it kept him humble and perhaps sane. But soon, his obsession took over his entire life. He began collecting skulls, bones, and skeletons from battlefields. He called them his silent advisors. Whenever he had a difficult decision to make, he'd sit among them and whisper his thoughts, convinced the dead would guide him. Even his dinners were grim spectacles. He'd invite his generals to eat in complete silence, lit only by candlelight, surrounded by old military banners and the bones of fallen soldiers. He told them, "You are all dust, remember that." Imagine being invited to dinner, and the host's plus one is a skeleton. But here's where the story gets strangely inspiring. Despite his bizarre habits, Frederick William was a genius administrator. He built one of Europe's most disciplined armies and transformed Prussia from a weak state into a rising superpower. He banned luxury, outlawed laziness, and demanded every citizen contribute to the kingdom's strength. Even his own children weren't spared. His son, the future Frederick the Great, was forced to watch brutal military drills from the age of 6. The king's life was a strange blend of brilliance and brutality. He wore old uniforms until they were torn, refused grand feasts, and scolded nobles for wearing jewelry. To him, death was the ultimate equalizer, a reminder that even kings rot, but his fascination with death grew darker with age. Witnesses claimed he often spoke to invisible figures in his room, spirits of fallen soldiers perhaps, or ghosts of guilt. Sometimes he'd shout orders in his sleep, as if commanding phantom armies from beyond. And every morning, when he climbed out of his coffin, he would say the same thing, "Not yet." It was as if he was bargaining with death itself, one night at a time. When he finally died in 1740, the people of Prussia didn't find his coffin empty. It was ready, waiting, and perfectly preserved. He was buried in the same one he had slept in for decades. Some say his last smile was one of satisfaction, like he had finally kept an appointment he'd been rehearsing for all his life. The irony? His death only strengthened his legend. His soldiers still toasted him as the king who feared no grave. And maybe that's the lesson he wanted to leave behind. That confronting death every night made him fearless by day. So while other monarchs fought to live forever, Frederick William I embraced the grave and ruled stronger because of it. Because sometimes to command life, you have to make peace with death. Coffins some kings craved gold, others power. But this one, he craved rats, snakes, and chaos. Welcome to the unhinged world of Emperor Zhou Hushao of China's Ming Dynasty, a man who ruled an empire like it was his personal playground. Born in 1491, Zhou Hushao was never meant to be ordinary. He became emperor at 14, too young, too rich, and far too curious about everything forbidden. From the moment he sat on the dragon throne, he treated it less like a seat of power and more like a stage for his bizarre imagination. He was smart, energetic, and wildly creative. But instead of focusing on governance, he turned the Forbidden City into a royal circus. His days were a mix of pranks, danger, and downright madness. He'd dress up as a commoner, sneak out of the palace with his guards, and roam the streets of Beijing. Sometimes he'd pretend to be a soldier, other times a shopkeeper, or a beggar. He even created his own fake kingdom inside the palace walls, complete with fake ministers, fake trials, and fake wars. He gave himself a new title, the General of the Powerful Kingdom of Leopard. And his favorite pastime? Declaring a war against imaginary enemies, complete with drums, flags, and terrified servants forced to act as troops. But his weirdness didn't stop at play. Bob Jocoso had a strange obsession with animals, especially wild ones. He built a private zoo inside the Forbidden City, filling it with tigers, leopards, crocodiles, snakes, and monkeys. And then he started experimenting on himself. He'd watch how animals moved, ate, and fought, and then try to imitate them. He believed consuming wild creatures would give him their strength. Soon, his royal kitchen became a nightmare. He ordered dishes made of rats, snakes, frogs, and even live fish. He'd chew snake hearts raw, swallow frog legs whole, and laugh as his horrified chefs looked away. He once forced his courtiers to join his A Feast of Beasts, promising promotions to anyone who dared to take a bite. Few survived the stomach ache. To the outside world, this looked like insanity, and maybe it was. But to Joe Hujo, it was freedom.